Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 1 of The Last of Us. And just to preface, just to get it right out of the way, I love The Last of Us Part 2 game. It is my favorite game of all time. This is one of my most anticipated seasons of television that I've ever had, because I think that the game is so fascinating in its structure and its way it tells its story, in the boldness of its story. And I love the first game. I do think that it is great. The story is really solid, but it is fairly simple as compared to Part 2. So the daunting task of adapting that game, which was very controversial for some reasons that we'll get into eventually here in this video, I was both mortified and extremely excited to see what they were going to do with Season 2 of The Last of Us. But of course, to not ruin the story for those who have not played the game, I will be getting to spoilers for the episode alone for the first half of this video, and I'll be getting to the changes and the stuff that I got from a game player in the second half of this video to get both perspectives here. But first, I want to focus on the episode itself, the performances, the direction, the horror elements, the writing in general. I'll be getting to all that stuff here first, but don't worry, if you're a lover of the game like I am, I'll be digging into so many theories and ideas of what I think they're going to do to adapt this story on later on in this episode. So let's start off by talking about Pedro Pascal in this episode and his storyline with Joel and Catherine O'Hara, because that is a character that's actually not inside of the game. So this is all original stuff here. And after the events of the first season, we got to see the decision that he made in taking out the Fireflies and rescuing Ellie at the expense of a possible cure, but to the benefit of his own selfishness in getting to keep this daughter figure that he had grown so attached to throughout that season. It makes sense from a personal level, from a perspective of you as the audience member. You were rooting for him to do that, but there are consequences for that. There's fallout for the decision that he made there, and that is what this season is going to be about. And I love the fact that we're digging a little bit deeper into the actual psychological aspects of that character and what he really thinks about it 5 years later, because yes, this episode does have a massive time jump of 5 years, just like it did inside of the game, and because of that we get to see the contentious relationship between Joel and Ellie after all this time has passed. And we don't get to exactly see why they're on bad terms in this exact moment, but that's Joel is holding something back, and we know what he cannot tell this therapist, and we know that this therapist is really trying to get through to Joel because he is clearly a broken person. We get to see through her, who is very similar to Joel in this moment in her life, that she's holding a lot of anger and resentment because of things that Joel did in the past. We get a little backstory with her husband and Eugene having been killed by Joel. Presumably he was bitten and turning into one of the infected, and Joel decided to take him out, apparently in a very brutal and cruel way, which I'm sure we'll get an episode, a flashback going back to that, because we know that Joey Pantoliano is going to be playing Catherine O'Hara's husband inside of this season. So I'm curious to see what we expand on in this relationship, and that's inner conflict within Joel. That's pain that Pedro Pascal has behind his eyes, because he does a fantastic job playing this version of Joel, who I think is a lot more emotionally unstable than the version inside of the game. Inside of the game, he's much more of an action hero. He's very much, going after, he's very badass, he's very, get things done type of a character. But this character, he has his panic attacks. He has all the mental health issues that stem out of the loss of Sarah inside of that first season. And so I find that this character and this version that Joel is playing to be equally as interesting, but in a very different way than his video game counterpart. And it really is the moment of Pedro Pascal inside of that therapy session where he is breaking down. There's tears welling up in his eyes, and you think that maybe he's going to finally say the things that he doesn't want to say out loud and finally get it out there. But you can see inside his face, you can see the wheels turning inside of his head, where he goes to be that stern, dark, cold, and just hardened version of himself, where he just kind of shuts down entirely from other people, and he just says, "I saved her." And I think that Pedro Pascal inside of that moment in particular was phenomenal.
I saved her.
We, of course, have the other additional cast members to this ensemble, including Isabella Merced as Dina and Young Mazzino as Jesse, and of course their dynamic and their chemistry with Bella Ramsey as Ellie, who we all love at this point. I love Bella Ramsey inside of the first season of The Last of Us, and she's continuing her streak of being a great character here. I think that she's playing her character a lot older, but still having that youthful energy and that playfulness that she had inside of that first season. Her bantering with Tommy, screaming that she is immune in the middle of nowhere, was great to see, but her chemistry, specifically with Dina, is brilliant. It's one of my favorite parts of the game, and the dance scene towards the end of this episode is basically just picked right from the game. It's shot for shot. It's one of those sequences that they did not need to change a single beat inside of that. We just get to see these real actors, portraying these characters, and you get to see the intimacy between them in a much more raw and real way, because we're looking at real people, which I think is a benefit to having this medium.
Oh, Ellie. I think they should be terrified of you.
We don't get too much of Jesse inside of this episode, but the moments that we got to see of him, I really did enjoy. I loved seeing him, get Ellie and Dina prepared to go on patrol, and the banter that they have and the very unserious nature that Ellie and Dina have together. Their chemistry again is off the charts, and to see that they are very reckless together, which is very much a point of the game as well. I love to see all of that, and of course we get to see young Mazino at the dance as well, kind of pushing Ellie to go over to Dina, because I think that relationship, and that's on again, off again thing between him and Dina is a really interesting part of the game as well, and you get to see them plant the seeds for future things we're going to see later on this season, which I really like to see. But of course, the character dynamics are not the only thing inside the show. We also have Craig Mazin coming back to direct this episode, along with the horror elements that he brings to this season, which I really loved all that stuff inside this episode. I really loved Dina and Ellie on patrol, stopping off at that food market, going inside, taking on a clicker, which you think is going to be a very intense and difficult thing for them to do, because it was so difficult for them to handle clickers instead of the first season. But once they go further inside and Ellie falls down lower into this store and she encounters a stalker, we get to see why The Last of Us Part 2 is one of my favorite games ever, because the infected inside of that game and the unique aspects of the infected of the game, I just love all of that stuff. The stalkers are really great adversaries inside the game, because there's this hearing ability that you use a lot inside of both the first and the second game to essentially see where any of the infected are around you at any given moment. But these stalkers, you cannot hear them. They will go around you. They will try to sneak around you in very smart and clever ways. And the worst part about their AI is that, if you die from them and you try to replay that level, you think they're going to do the same thing over again. You're going to be prepared for the next time. But no, they're going to be in a different spot every single time, and they are so frustrating to get through inside of the game, and it is absolutely horrifying. And I think that Craig Mazin did a great job at capturing that horror element of the game inside of this episode, and to see how clever these stalkers really are. And an even greater expansion from the game inside this episode is the fact that Ellie and Dina then go to the council run by Tommy and Maria to explain that, these infected were very intelligent, they were dodging us and they were doing all these things, and to see that the infected are evolving in some sort of way, which is not really expanded on inside the game. They're just new infected that you encounter that you didn't just encounter in the first game, because you got to add new threats inside of the second game. They gave story reason to expand on that inside of this world, which I think is really fascinating. And of course, the thing that bookends this episode is going to be the introduction of Kaitlyn Dever as Abby, who, if you're a person who has not played the game, I'm sure you've heard a lot of anticipation for this character, because this is a character that is going to be massive in this season of The Last of Us, which I cannot wait to see more of her character. But we got to see her motivations a lot earlier than we did inside of the video game. We get to see that she was a part of the Fireflies, and that her group of the Seattle crew, which we'll come to know them as, are very much affected by what Joel did at the end of the last season, as that is the inciting incident for the events that happened here inside of The Last of Us Season 2. And so it's interesting to see that we're starting off to see that she is, she's going after Joel. That is her motivation. She wants to kill him for revenge very slowly. We get to see that simmering anger inside of her eyes, which I love to see, which is very interesting to see from Kaitlyn Dever in particular.
When we kill him, we kill him slowly.
Generally speaking, she has not played a role like this. I loved her in Booksmart. I think that she was a phenomenal actress inside of that movie, and she's great in this this Alien movie that was on Hulu. I can't remember the name of it, and she was in that weird Tim Allen show that was definitely a comedy, and so I have not seen her in a role quite like this. And yes, she's not as buff as her video game counterpart, but honestly, I think as a performer, I think that she is a very strong performer. I think that The Last of Us has gone for, stronger performers over, characters that look exactly like they do instead of the video game, which I think is a smarter choice for a video game adaptation inside of this medium. So I'm very curious to see what they do with Abby inside of this season, and to introduce her motives a little bit earlier into the story than we did inside the video game is very interesting. But that's going to bring us to the actual spoiler section for the video game. So that's my general thoughts on the episode at large. I think that it was very well done. I think the performances were great. I love the horror sequences. I love Craig Mazin's direction. I'm very excited to see where we go from here. As a lover of The Last of Us Part 2, this is extremely exciting stuff, and I think that you guys are in for a treat for this season of The Last of Us. I'm very curious to see what your reactions are. So comment down below if you're a person who didn't play the game, and if you are somebody who played the game and want to comment down below as well, just tag spoiler if you're going to talk about any video game spoilers. So let's just jump into the video game spoilers, because I have a lot of thoughts on how they're going to adapt this season. I'm very curious how they're going to do the structure of this show, because they've already made some drastic changes with, introducing Abby's, motivations, because in the game, Abby kills Joel like 45 minutes into gameplay, and you have like a 40-hour game after that where you get to play as Ellie going for revenge to kill Abby in Seattle. And so that is what the game is for the first half. But at the midpoint of the game, we get a giant cliffhanger, and then we flash back all the way to the beginning of the story, but from Abby's perspective, to see why she killed Joel, to see what she is, doing in the entire, Ellie revenge tour that she's taking to kill all the other members of the Seattle crew until she finally gets to confront Abby. And I think the brilliant part of the video game, the reason why The Last of Us Part 2 is my favorite game of all time, is that the perspective in which it shows you with these characters is what's, is the point of the game at large, because it is a very violent game. And, of course, there's a lot of, conversation, a lot of discourse over violence in video games. And I think that The Last of Us Part 2 is a great, confrontation of those ideas, because you play as this character Ellie, who is, so dead set on revenge for killing Joel, which you as an audience member playing this game is so incredibly pissed off at this character Abby. You hate her guts. You want to go on this journey to kill this character, because this character killed a character that you love from the first game, the first 40 minutes inside of this one. And so you are so angry, you're so violent, you're killing all these people inside of the video game. And when you get that flashback, and once you get to see Abby's perspective, the game makers basically just shove it in your face and say, you were wrong for feeling the way that you did, and that this character was very, right in her own journey and has her own reasons for doing what she did in a very similar way to what Joel did in the first season. So a very similar way to what Ellie is doing inside of this season. But the difference is we have a character who accomplishes her goal and revenge. We get to see how she takes that revenge and realizes that, revenge was the wrong thing to do, and to realize that she doesn't like herself as a person to want to change so badly for these other characters named Lev and Yara, which I hope we will get to see in season 3, because we know that The Last of Us Part 2 is a very long game, and they said they're going to split this show into 2 seasons. So my hope here is that, yes, we got to see that Abby is a Firefly inside this episode, but we didn't get to see who she was connected to. We didn't get to know that, oh yeah, her father is the doctor that was going to do the procedure to, save the world using Ellie's immunity, and that's a very big part of her character and for those motivations. And I think that we're going to hold off on that until a little bit later on in the season. I think that they showed a little hint at that towards one of the later trailers, and so I think we will get that reveal that her dad was the doctor inside of season 1. And so I just at least hope that we hold off on seeing any of Abby's perspective until season 3. I hope that this season goes all the way up until the theater sequence where Abby shows up and kills Jesse and takes on Tommy and injures Tommy, and then has the giant fight with Ellie and decides to let Ellie go, which spirals her on to the epilogue of that story. But I really hope that we end off at that point, and season 3 has very little Bella Ramsey and has a whole bunch of Caitlin Dever. We get to see a whole perspective of her character and what she was doing with Lev and Yara inside of season 3, and the last few episodes of season 3 is going to be the epilogue of The Last of Us Part 2, and you get to see everything that happens with her, going after revenge once again and breaking up with Dina and having all the tragic stuff that happens with her and her guitar and her fingers, which her playing the guitar in this episode just reminded me of her losing her fingers, and it broke my heart all over again. But there's so many things structurally about The Last of Us Part 2 that they're already starting to mess with here, and I really hope that they maintain that perspective of really hating this Abby character for season 2, so we can learn that our hatred and our want for vengeance was wrong in season 3. That is my one wish for this season of television, which is very exciting to me, because I love The Last of Us Part 2. I love the boldness in which that they told that story, and I do think that, yes, I do think that it could be reworked and reorganized a little bit inside of a TV adaptation, but I don't want them to ruin that core message of building up that anger inside the audience only to tell them to their face that they're wrong for feeling the way that they did. I cannot wait for the rest of the season, and specifically for season 3, because I think season 3 is going to be great, and Abby is one of my favorite characters of all time, because honestly, Team Abby, come at me. But those are just going to be my thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 1. Again, for anybody in the comment section down below, if you're somebody who just watched the show and didn't play the game, feel free to comment whatever you want. But for anybody who did play the game and knows what's going to happen inside the series, please just tag with spoilers, because this is not a show that you want spoiled to you, because the story is truly something else. And the way that it's told is so incredibly unique, and it is my favorite aspect of The Last of Us, is the way that it makes you feel. And I cannot wait to see it be pulled off in television. So definitely comment down below what your thoughts are on this episode if you're excited for the season and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video to see more reviews just like this. I've also been doing reviews for Daredevil Born Again, which I think is a fascinating Frankenstein of a show from the old version to the new version that we get to see on Disney Plus. The finale is going to be on this Tuesday, so I'm very excited to talk about that. And I think we're also going to have Andor Season 2 later on this month as well. So a lot of TV reviews here on the channel, along with the movie reviews. I believe the last movie I reviewed was Death of a Unicorn. I was super busy this week, so I wasn't able to review Drop, but I actually did really enjoy Drop. But, you know, just stay tuned on the channel to subscribe to see more reviews just like this one, including movie reviews, TV reviews, and more. So thanks everybody for watching. Like I said, comment down below, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you all in my next one. Again, Team Abby.